All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 3. I find it kind of hard to imagine that we're getting so far through the semester already. It's going to be over before we know it. And yeah, I think that's kind of exciting. So like I said, week 3, woohoo. This week's aesthetically pleasing PowerPoint brought to you by yours truly. So here's kind of what I think we'll go over today. Some announcements. We'll do a bit of a lecture on the target audience, a quasi-group discussion. Groups are still kind of a sketchy thing, so yeah. We'll also talk about this week's extra credit opportunity. I'll try to freak you guys out a little bit with how the rhetorical appeals can be used ineffectively or nefariously against you. I think that that's really cool. We'll talk briefly about the week coming up, and then I will go over next week, which is the paper week. Woohoo! So does anyone have any questions about last week or anything before we start? If anything comes up, please let me know via email and I will answer your questions. So, I am trudging through your invention activity. These took you guys a long time to do. It takes me a long time to grade. I have been grading since Thursday these assignments, and I should be getting this class done today. That is the goal that I have set myself. But that being said, the reason that it takes me so long is that I am reading all of your responses very thoroughly and commenting on much of what you say. This assignment is probably the most helpful for you for your first paper. It has so much information on it, as you guys saw. It's a big assignment. It asks you to develop your ideas a little bit on various aspects of the article. It's going to be incredibly helpful for you guys to refer to it for your first paper. And that's why I'm trying to leave you guys really good feedback on your answers, trying to get you guys to maybe think further on something, ask you why you think what you think, all that kind of stuff. So some of you have that assignment graded already. If you haven't, take a look at my comments. But when I get the rest of you graded today, saying that absolutely, please take a look at my comments. I'm putting a lot of effort into it for you guys, so I hope that you benefit from the comments that I leave you. And if any of my comments don't make sense or you want some clarification about a misunderstanding or something, please send me an email. I am here to help, but I can't help if I don't know what you're struggling with. So just keep that in mind. If your invention activities don't take me all day to grade, I might have the Ethos Pathos draft done today too. We'll see. I'm setting high expectations for myself. Hopefully I can meet them. And then keep some of these dates just in the back of your mind. I don't want them to be a surprise to anyone. The first paper is due next Friday, the 19th, which means that the rough drafts will be due on Monday, the 15th. The Meet with Sheridan assignment will open next week as well, and there will be no class on Monday. At the end of this presentation, I'll go over more in detail what these next week things are going to look like. But these are kind of the gist of the things that I want you to remember now. Questions, comments, concerns about the announcements, grading your invention activities? It's a great assignment, right, guys? I'm sure it was your favorite. But like I said, they'll be very helpful. I think you'll be glad you did it when you're writing your paper, hopefully. So this isn't quite as big an announcement for you guys as it was my 9:30 because bless their hearts, they dealt with a lot of technical difficulties on Monday. But my Zoom account is finally fixed and I am no longer affiliated with Kennesaw State University. If you want the story, email me. Emily, you asked, should we use internal citations for our paper? Yes, internal citations. Since we're doing a rhetorical analysis of an argument, your only quote should be from the source itself. So whatever article you chose. You'll need this to back up your claims about the presence of the appeals. So don't think I've gotten to your invention activity yet. So for whatever article you use, if you say author X uses pathos effectively when he or she says this, you'll need to cite that and then discuss how it's an effective use. Does that make sense, Emily? For this paper, no. The only work that you're going to be using is the article that I gave you. So for this paper, no. The other papers, we'll get into that. So, yeah, absolutely. Keep the questions coming as you guys have them, but we will continue. Like I said, if you want the fun account of my Zoom trials and tribulations and about 5 hours of phone time last week, let me know. I'll tell you about it. But today I want to talk about the target audience. I really like this picture. It's so colorful. So how to identify the target audience. This is going to be critical not only for this paper, but for all of the other papers that we write. So this will probably be a very good PowerPoint to refer to. And if you have any questions about the target audience and all of these things that we're going to cover, please let me know as soon as possible. The target audience is only going to get more important as we move on. So if there's anything that's confusing, please, please, please let me know. Yeah, so with that, how do we even go about identifying the target audience? So ask yourself, once you read the article, who do you think the author is writing to? So an easy way to do that is to think about who is the author trying to convince. In this class, we're reading persuasive arguments. So who is the author trying to persuade? So keep in mind that the author isn't preaching to the choir. As you'll note in my lovely image of an actual preacher preaching to the choir. So if the person that the author is writing to already agrees with everything that the author thinks, or does what the author thinks that they should do, there would be no reason to write the article. So instead, think about who doesn't do these things that the author wants them to do, who has a different opinion than the author. That's how we can come to who the target audience is. So instead of someone preaching to people who are like literally dressed the same, I thought that was kind of cool. We instead want to think about something more along the lines of the other image that I chose, which I also kind of like. The red thinker head thing, could be a robot, who the heck knows, and the blue one. So they are likely trying to persuade each other. Red is not blue and blue is not red. Therefore, there are arguments to be made, things to be said that is intended to persuade the other to do something or think something that the other thinks. I like these visual representations. You can tell I'm very proud of myself. So, yeah, I think we have covered that pretty well. I like this explanation a lot. So when you're writing your paper, how do you know if the target audience that you've identified is specific enough? Because I've noted on many, many invention activities that, like, yes, this is technically part of the audience, but how can we make this even more specific? So one way to do that is to see if you're using any of these 3 words. These are the words that I saw the most often on your assignments. Anyone, people, and Americans. And they're fine to use, but if you notice that you're using them, make sure that you are defining who they are. specifically. So here are some examples that I wrote, did not take this from any assignments, of target audiences that are not specific enough for all 4 of the articles that I assigned to you guys. So one of these is applicable to the article that you're reading, which I think is cool. Here's a little favor for you guys. So anyone who buys stocks, people who have strong opinions, Americans who don't have internet access, or anyone in the STEM field. These are technically part of the entire audience, but they are not the target audience. They are not who the author is trying to convince of something. So these could be a good thing to refer to. So how can we make these not specific enough target ideas of the audience into a specific target audience? Describe the audience. So as I noted, I promised that thinking about the target audience is a lot easier than you think it is. I'm not trying to be tricky about this. So how do you specify anything? You begin to describe it. So if you're not sure where to start when it comes to the audience of the paper that you're reading, remember the lovely little thing that we all learned in elementary school, I think. Look at these things making a comeback. So that's who, what, when, where, why, and how. And they can get you started on thinking about how to take the entirety of the possible audience and make it into something specific. So who is a member of this audience, or perhaps who is excluded from it? What does this audience believe? When does this audience need to do something, which may not be quite as helpful as the others, but it exists. Where is a problem occurring, and then how can the audience fix the problem that the author is saying exists? These are all great things to get those gears turning on how you can identify it. I reject you, Flash Player. So if you're still feeling uncertain about how to make your audience specific enough, please email me. I sound like a broken record at this point, but I really want to help you guys understand this concept. So if there's any confusion, let me know. So then once we start thinking about how to identify a specific audience, how can we tell if it is supportive, neutral, or skeptical to what the author is saying? So I would like to point out that just because the author is trying to persuade someone or a group to do or think or whatever, something different, this doesn't necessarily mean that the audience is against this persuasion or would not accept it. So it's important to keep in mind that this is different than preaching to the choir. There's still an element of difference in the audience, but perhaps there's a bit of a spectrum here between the supportive audience and the skeptical audience, where the differences for the supportive audience are minimal and the differences for the skeptical audience are great. So some audiences may be more inclined to agree with the persuasion than others. So a good example of this could be someone telling the parishioners of a church that they should donate to a specific charity. They're still trying to persuade them to donate where they are not already donating, but perhaps church members would be more likely to accept such donations and see it as their calling to give alms or what have you. Alternatively, some audiences may not have any previous conceptions of the issue and therefore not really have an opinion. I wish everyone would be more like this and not immediately go to the other one, having polar opposite beliefs. So we just got out of a political year, so I don't think I have to explain this to you too much, that some people just want to believe the exact opposite of what you believe, and the persuasion tactics that you have to use have to be geared towards an extremely skeptical audience who does not want to easily believe what you have to say. So all this boils down to, when you think about this target audience, ask yourself how likely they're willing to accept what the author is saying. How likely are they to do what the author wants them to do? How likely are they to believe what they're being asked to believe? So I hope that that clears some things up. Speaking of clearing things up, I made this cute little list for you guys. As you can tell, I'm very proud of myself with this PowerPoint. Love it. So here are some is and is not regarding the target audience. So I intend this to be something that you guys can refer to as you're writing your paper. I will probably use something similar to this when we start talking about our other papers. So these are some good concepts to have an understanding of now. A couple things that I would like to note is that, the target audience is specific. It is not vague. And the target audience does think that their reasons are justifiable. So for the persuasion that we're talking about in this class, our target audiences, even if they're skeptical, don't think that they're right just because I think so. I think we're all familiar with asking a parent or a guardian, can I go hang out with friends even if it's past my curfew? And they say no, and you ask why, and they say because I said so. And it seems, you don't really have a good reason to say no. That's not what we are thinking about in terms of our target audience. Our target audience has reasons that they believe what they think, or they have reasons to not do what the author would like them to do. Be that a financial reason, be that a belief, be it a difference in perspective. So within the confines of persuasion, the articles that I've given you, the people who disagree with the author don't do so out of spite. Trying to shine some light in the darkness of argumentation after this rambunctious political year. Ugh. So I tried to make this a breakout discussion in my last class, and the breakout room and file situation was not wanting to work with me. So we're going to ixnay that activity back to the drawing board for me. It was apparently too much for me to ask for Zoom to just work flawlessly for me this week. So this is where I'm going to ask you guys to get those thinking caps on and the eagerness to participate so that we can get through these images pretty quickly. But for all of the images that I have included, I would like you guys to think about who the author of the image could be, what the main argument of the image is, specifically who the target audience could be, and how the rhetorical appeals are present, and which one may be the most present. So as I said, the more discussion we do, the faster we can go through this. I tried to upload these files to my students last class and they couldn't get them, and it was just a whole mess. So this image that is saying, you stop the spread. What kinds of things can we infer from this? Can I put the questions in the chat? Probably. Let's see. I know the questions, so I'll just keep asking them. How's that? Technology, guys, love it. We're trying, guys. Zoom University, best place on earth. So as I was saying, you stop the spread. Who do you think that the intended audience for this image could be? And you can either unmute yourself or respond in the chat. I'm kind of down for whatever gets us talking.
For the resistant audience of individuals that don't want to wear a mask.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they need to be told to wear their masks, don't they? So how about what rhetorical appeal do you think is the most present here? Yeah, Garen says Americans because of the blue and red. That's good. That's a great broad audience to think of. So Garen, we can take that Americans from the blue and red and narrow it down to Americans who don't want to wear masks. You see how that works? Excellent. People who don't want to wear masks. I'm so proud of you guys. So what about the rhetorical appeals? What do we make of that big word you? It seems to be kind of calling someone out, doesn't it? Great observation, Emily. It puts responsibility on the audience. It's directly pointing the finger saying, you stop the spread. It is your responsibility to wear a mask. Excellent. I think that's fantastic. So we will move on. I can hear the crickets beginning. They trust us. We butcher them. So this billboard probably looks like it's on the side of a building. It has an author on it. So what do we make of that?
This could be from a publishing house of some sort.
Yeah. Yeah. Go vegan world. What kind of ethos does that give this author?
A little more credibility because they have like an established company.
Yeah, that's a fantastic observation. They're affiliated with something. They probably know things about why people should, in their opinion, go vegan. What do you guys make of the mass-produced turkey
They're trying to make it look friendly by having someone pet it, making it look more human, and in that fact that it's enjoying the pet.
Yeah. So what does that do?
Humanizes it?
Well, maybe not humanize it, but you're right. We kind of build that connection to it. So if this hand is extending and petting this turkey, what kind of associations can we draw between humans and the turkey? What else do we pet?
Like our own pets. So
Exactly.
there are a connection between that and our own animals.
Exactly. And then when that connection is established, what appeal is at work there?
Pathos.
Exactly. Fantastic job. If we begin to associate the turkey with our own pets, or with perhaps as being an animal that is capable of love and affection, we begin to sympathize with it and think, yeah, how many hundreds of probably thousands of turkeys are butchered every day? Could be an effective argument against some people. This one's a blast from the past. I thought this was cool. So if I have any history buffs in the class, who is the target audience for this ad?
World War I era Americans.
Absolutely. Great job, Benedict. So if it's World War I Americans, what is being symbolized by the gorilla?
The inhuman nature of the enemy.
Yeah, but specifically who?
The Germans.
Yeah, exactly. So what kinds of rhetorical appeals are at play here? Maybe with someone besides you, Benedict, because you seem to understand this ad very well. So what do you make of the snarl that's on the face of this gorilla? Does this look like a friendly gorilla? And what about the woman, the damsel in distress?
I think it's intending to make like the Germans or whoever we're fighting against look horrible and um like this horrible enemy, especially when it's taking like Lady Liberty. It's making the audience feel bad for like their country so that they will be more likely to enlist, as it says, and feel pain for their country.
Yeah, exactly, Jimena. That's exactly what this is trying to do. And especially if you look down at the bottom of where the gorilla's feet are, it's coming to America. And that is a subliminal aspect of this image, is that back here, there's Europe and it's in desolation because of the war ravaging. And this gorilla capturing Lady Liberty is entering American soil. And because of that, destroy this mad brute, appealing to, as you guys mentioned, especially for the time, 18 to maybe like 30, kind of pushing it, men who should enlist and defend their country from the Nazi threat. Well, I guess Second Reich threat, but I was just excited about the blast of the past, guys. And this one. This is our last image, guys. So who is the intended audience of this poster? Does anyone know who this is? I'm thinking sports.
Isn't it like a football team?
It's a baseball team, but you're on the right track. This is a mascot, is what I'm getting at. So this is Chief Wahoo from the Cleveland Indians. But you're very right. You can substitute what was the Washington Redskins in for that, and the message is the same. So if that's who the image is, or perhaps the idea that the image reflects, who is the intended audience?
The people that are supporting the mascot staying in play, so on and so forth.
Exactly. Exactly. The people who see no problem with Chief Wahoo being the mascot of the Cleveland Indians. So, that being said, what kinds of rhetorical appeals are in play here? So the first thing I notice is the language. We've got racism in big letters in red. First word we see. What kinds of rhetorical movements are being made here?
I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but I think it's like Kairos. Like the timeliness of it, especially since he's at at a baseball game, you can clearly see in the background that there's baseball fans walking out.
Yeah.
Trying to make a statement that in such a sensitive time period, especially where racism has been sparked, and it's also, I don't know how to phrase that, but it's just a hot topic right now.
Exactly.
The language appeals to a lot, it's going to appeal to a lot of this audience's emotions and their logic also, because I mean, here they are wearing this like Chief Indian on their shirts and the name Indians on their shirts, and they're going to look at this and be like, the hope is that they'll question it and wonder like, why am I really wearing this?
Exactly. That's an excellent observation. And yes, you're right. It is pronounced Kairos. I realize with everything being online, it's a word that you might have seen but never really heard anyone pronounce. That happens to me all the time. And Tyler says pathos because people have been hurt by racism, and that is a great observation as well. And when you use that word racism, you have that moment of reflection, you know, this thing that I was doing, supporting the Cleveland Indians, wearing a shirt with Chief Wahoo on it, perhaps wasn't intentionally racism, but when this poster is being presented to you, maybe you think, oh my goodness, what am I actually wearing? This image, guys, is very stereotypical. So yeah, Tyler's mention of pathos, I think, is awesome too, because it can really spark emotion, maybe remorse that perhaps you were wearing this memorabilia and didn't realize just how offensive to people it was. Perhaps people who hadn't heard of the Cleveland Indians or recognize what the image is, being upset that it is being used as an image and commercialized. And that note of the racism present here can make people upset. So excellent job, guys. I'm very proud. Mid-class stretch. Woo. All right. So this is where we kind of get into where I hope to freak you guys out just a little bit with these appeals, because they can be used against you. And I want you to be aware of that. They can be taken advantage of. So I'm going to go over some ways in which they can be misused. And I hope that you guys will pay attention to these points and be on the lookout for them in the articles that you read, in this news that you watch, anything that you see that's trying to persuade you. Keep some of these in mind. So I think that this quote from Kenneth Burke captures the concern of the rhetorical appeals well. So Kenneth Burke is a rhetorician whose popular work comes from about like the World War I era. All of the rhetoric grad students are studying him right now. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. Anyway, so Kenneth Burke writes that the most characteristic concern of rhetoric is the manipulation of people's beliefs for political ends. The basic function of rhetoric is the use of words by human agents to form attitudes or to induce actions in other human agents. So it's what we've been talking about all along, that these rhetorical appeals are tools for us to persuade other people to think or do something different than what they would do. So, as many of you have noted and have said on some of your assignments, this isn't always a good thing. So, this week's extra credit opportunity. I want to know, which appeal do you think can be the most prone to manipulation? So in the chat, tell me which appeal and why you think that it would be manipulated so much to get this week's extra credit points. There is really no correct answer for which one is the most manipulative, so I just want to see what you guys think. So take a couple of moments to think about your response. And let me know if what I'm asking you makes sense. The last class had a question about it, so any questions, please let me know. So far everyone's saying pathos. Everyone's making some good observations too. It's very easy to play into the emotions of others. Yes, Benedict mentioned biases. That's great. It's easy to play into party politics in terms of pathos. Ooh, the first non-pathos answer. Shay says logos, because you can use persuasion against people and opinions that may or may not be the best. That's a great observation. And so Sophie raises that with an ethos. We will start to continue. I'm not surprised that most of you chose pathos. That's what the last class chose too. But we're going to go over a couple of examples of how all of the appeals can have their downfalls. So perhaps by the end of these next couple of slides, I wonder if your opinions change, if something seems maybe more manipulative than others, or what you think. So let me know. So first up is ethos. How can people abuse their authority? I really hope that most of you are thinking, wow, I wonder. So the obvious one is power and trust. So the most obvious examples of people with power over us, rulers, governors, tyrants, kings, queens, presidents, religious figures, law enforcement, any of these people. You're all familiar with the phrase abuse of power at this point in your lives. And that is very true, is that these people hold a position over us and can abuse that and make us do things, think things that we wouldn't normally do or think for ourselves. Another potential guilty party of this would be the intelligentsia, professors, instructors, philosophers, etc., and professionals, so doctors, lawyers, scientists, etc. So the thing that these people all have in common is that they either have power or some sort of credential that gives them an aspect of trustworthiness that they can then turn against us. So, the people who have power misusing that, I don't think is a surprise to you guys. History and the news should kind of explain that pretty well. But the intelligentsia and professionals, I think, might be a little bit more subliminal. And this is where I say, question who is giving you the information. Don't trust every scientific article just because it's written by a scientist. The concerns about fake news, misinformation, disinformation stem from some of these aspects, that people who we assume to be trustworthy, we assume to be, perhaps in the case of the professionals, purveyors of truth. Doctors help people, lawyers abide by the law, or they try to enforce the law, scientists study science. We don't necessarily think about the capacity for these people to use that position against others. So I think many of you could probably think of scandals or other bad things that happen with people like this, and it usually makes the news because we tend to trust these people. So as I noted at the bottom, they have something that they can hold over our heads. So be aware of that and who has power over you or who you're deciding to trust. And as many of you have noted, pathos can obviously be misused. So how exactly can you abuse the emotions of others? Well, the easiest way to do this is through fear and anger. Those tend to be the ones that are employed the most by governments, by leaders, people who want to push a certain agenda. Fear always works, to quote Zootopia. Love that movie. But it's true. So when you do things to incite riots, or you encourage people to be xenophobic or jingoistic, afraid of immigrants, afraid of people of other nationalities. When you convince people that terrorism is a threat that they need to be constantly worried about, you are controlling their beliefs. You are hoping that they will react in a certain way driven by this fear. Terrorism is a great example. The war on terror was in part something that caused Americans to adopt a certain set of beliefs and want to see those beliefs put to an end. I also threw up threatening robocalls. I get one about once a week that says that there's a warrant out for my arrest, which is like laughable because I don't really do anything. So I'm sure many of you have gotten, maybe not quite so extreme robocalls, but robocalls nonetheless, maybe saying that your warranty is up, or that maybe if you're lucky like I am, that someone wants to arrest you. But this is trying to get you to react to the person's message because you're afraid. And then sympathy can also be abused. Fraudulent charities, I think we've all heard of them. Those also tend to go into the news a lot when they are discovered to be fraudulent, because we tend to trust charities. So here's where kind of an ethos and pathos play well together. And then sometimes people pretend to be destitute and need help. Maybe you've experienced this where like a friend asks for help or asks if you can buy lunch because they don't have enough money for it when they actually do. They're playing on your sympathies, you know, like, sure, I'll buy my friend lunch. I care about this person. I don't want them to be hungry. When in actuality, they could have paid for it themselves. This isn't always the case, obviously. Any of these appeals can be used genuinely, but that's just an example of how you may have been manipulated before. Sorry. And then logos. So I'm not surprised that not many of you threw out logos as an option, because these tend to be the ones that aren't obvious. So how do people abuse logic? And the answer is through flaws in logic, which we call logical fallacies. There are like hundreds of logical fallacies, and most of them have names, which is really cool. I love studying them. Call me weird if you want to, but they're cool. So I picked out a couple of my favorite logical fallacies for you. That sounds so freaking nerdy to say, guys. Whatever. These are really cool, and I think that they are especially applicable to politics, to discussions that you may have in the future. So the first one is the ad hominem attack. So this is when during an argument you resort to attacking the character of the other person by calling them bad names, by saying that they don't pay their taxes, or that their son is involved with like money laundering from other countries. Wonder if that's ringing a bell to anyone. As I said before, we just came off of a presidential election year, so the ad hominem attack was used a lot. And this is when someone who's making an argument tries to distract from the argument by saying that I'm right because that other person is awful, and they're awful for these reasons. And it's not so much that what I'm saying is right. I'm trying to convince you that if this person's awful, then anything that they say must be false, because how can an awful person be right? As I said, very present last year during the debates. Second one is the red herring. I think many of you have probably either used this or experienced this, but maybe not by this name. So the red herring is when you distract from the argument by like totally changing the subject. So for example, like if you come home after curfew, you're living with your parents or your guardian, they ask, you know, what the heck were you doing? And you say, you know, there was a really good deal on McChickens at McDonald's. Like, you're distracting from the argument at hand, which is, why the heck did you break curfew? And going off on a tangent to something totally unrelated. This can be extremely obvious, like the example that I just gave, or it can be more implied. There's a lot of range for this red herring logical fallacy. Very cool. And then the last one is the slippery slope. So also extremely present during political debates. So when someone uses a slippery slope logical fallacy, they're saying that if one bad thing happens, another more terrible thing is absolutely for sure going to happen. So a good example of this would be, if we expand Medicare for all people for free, we are going to become communist China or North Korea. Where the argument that I'm making doesn't really flow from one piece to the other. It doesn't have good logos. The reasons that I'm giving do not support the conclusion. Just because we expand healthcare for people does not mean that we are going to become North Korea. But many people use this argument to try to appeal to pathos a bit, to get people to fear this other thing so that they don't want to do this thing. They fear North Korea, so they don't want to expand healthcare. I hope I explained that well. I love logical fallacies, and I tend to get very caught up in jargon. So if there are any questions about how these appeals are misused, please let me know in the chat, or you can email me too. But yeah, we will move on. I hope I freaked you guys out just a little bit, like made you question arguments and who's presenting them and the logic of them. Like, this is cool stuff. Benedict, I see you unmuted. Do you have a comment or a question?
I wasn't unmuted.
Ah, well, look at me going and seeing things that I don't actually see. Well, we shall continue. So here is your week ahead. Thankfully, this week is not as assignment intensive as last week. I love grading invention activities, guys. It's the assignment that takes me the longest to grade besides your papers. I love it. Anyway, the assignments this week, I think, are not too terrible. The instructions are available for each of the assignments. If you have any questions, please let me know. This PowerPoint that I gave will be published after class, so you can access it then. And then I haven't published the questions for the reading quiz just yet, so it won't be worth 0 points later. But that, yeah, I'll do that after class. So as I said, final reminders for next week. The paper is due Friday. Keep that on the back burner. And so here's what I expect for Monday. And I want this to be clear. I don't want to surprise anybody. So for Monday, February 15th, I expect everyone to submit a rough draft of their first paper. So it is important that they are submitted on time because peer reviews will be assigned automatically at midnight. If you don't submit it on time, you won't be assigned to a peer review and you won't be able to participate in the peer review workshop. I'm also not offering extensions for the rough draft because we're looking for rough drafts of any sort. So if it's not perfect, don't worry about it. Just turn it in and do the peer review activity. So that being said, there are 2-point earning opportunities associated with the peer review. The first is submitting the rough draft, and the second is doing a good peer review of your peers' papers. This needs to be more in depth than this is good. No, ask questions, say where things are confusing, make suggestions, all that good stuff. We've got some readings that'll go over more how to do a good peer review, what you can do to get full points for this. So rough drafts must be at least 2 pages in length to get credit. That's a little less than half of what the final paper should be. So that should be manageable, I think. And then the Meet with Sheridan assignment will open on Monday during class. So that's why there's no class on Monday. I want to give students as many opportunities to meet with me one-on-one as possible. So as I just mentioned, this is an opportunity for you guys to meet with me one-on-one, to go over your paper, ideas, questions, concerns, all that good stuff. This is worth 20 points, so it's more than all of your other assignments, really. Yeah, it's an important one to do. The students who did this assignment last semester got the best grades in my class, which isn't surprising. So the Meet with Sheridan assignment will have a Google Doc that I will share with all of you, in which you can sign up for a time slot to meet with me. And I will let you guys know what I'm thinking of in terms of like how many times you can meet with me, because I have to meet with 40 students. So we're going to have fun. It's going to be lovely. Are there any questions about the final reminders? Or in general? Did anyone have an epiphany? I love saying that word for some reason. I'll take that as a no. If you come up with something, please email me. I want going into our first paper to be as easy for everyone as possible. So if you have any concerns, let me know. I'd be more than happy to help you. And with that, have a good rest of your day and a good week.
Hello,
Hi.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's up?
Hi. I was wondering,
Oh,
rough draft on. So the rough draft is due on Monday, correct?
yes, Monday the 15th.
Okay, so before then, are we allowed to email you like for questions or help on it, or is it okay since it's just a draft?
Well, it would be okay since it's just the draft, but that's up to you. If you want to have more of your rough draft done before Monday, I'd be more than willing to go over things with you. So it just depends. But I'm not
Okay.
expecting.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, just let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bye.
Bye.